It started with a key. Not metaphorically, I mean a literal, cold, silver key. I found it on the floor of the laundry room wedged between the wall and the dryer, lying there like it had been trying to hide. It wasn't one of ours. We lived in a modest two-story outside of Cleveland, nothing fancy, and I knew every key that belonged to every drawer, door, and godforsaken cabinet in that house. This one had no label, no matching lock, and it didn't look like something that had ever belonged to our world. That same night, she came home late again. Third time that week. Her makeup looked fresher than when she left that morning. Hair slicked back in a bun that definitely hadn't been on her head when she grabbed her iced coffee and rushed out, claiming she was meeting Lori for brunch. I asked her if she had fun. She said Lori had to cancel last minute, so she just walked around the mall. Alone. For 4 hours. No bags, no receipts, no irritation like she usually had when her friends bailed on plans. Just that blank, perfectly flat tone she'd started using lately. Like she was performing our conversations on stage and I was the unlucky audience member. I waited until she went to bed. I stood in the hallway, looking at the back of her head as she lay there, scrolling on her phone, laughing quiet, short bursts, at something I wasn't allowed to see. I wanted to ask her about the key. Instead, I went to the garage and smoked 2 cigarettes, even though I haven't smoked in 6 years. My hands didn't stop shaking until the second one was done. The next morning, I called Lori from my work parking lot. I never do that, we've only spoken at holidays and birthday parties. She sounded tired but friendly. Hey, weird question. Did you and my wife hang out yesterday? A pause. Too long for comfort. Oh, no, I haven't seen her in a few weeks actually. Is everything okay? I thanked her and said something about a surprise plan I had been thinking of. Hung up, then sat there for 10 full minutes, just watching people walk in and out of the office building like ants, each of them with somewhere to go, something to be. I felt like a man who had already stepped off a ledge but hadn't hit the ground yet. That night, I didn't say anything. I pretended to fall asleep before she did. And when she snuck out of bed just after 1:30 a.m., I waited 10 minutes, then followed. She didn't drive far. Maybe 5 minutes to an apartment complex I didn't recognize. The kind where all the buildings look the same and the parking lots smell like stale pizza and lost time. She parked. Got out. She didn't knock. She used the key. It was like watching someone else live in her skin. She didn't hesitate. She moved like she belonged there. I sat there in my car for 20 minutes. Staring at the closed door she disappeared behind. My hands itched to do something. Anything. But instead I just stared, like if I watched long enough the universe might step in and press rewind. When she came home that morning around 6:45, I was at the kitchen table. I hadn't slept. She didn't expect me to be awake. She jumped a little when she saw me, then composed herself like she was stepping into a meeting. Oh, you're up early. Yeah, I said, voice flat. So are you. The silence after that was thick enough to chew. She didn't explain. Didn't offer any lie or excuse. Just opened the fridge, poured herself orange juice, and sipped it like she hadn't just walked out of another man's life and back into mine like nothing happened. I didn't bring up the key. Not yet. I didn't ask whose bed she had crawled out of. I wanted to see how long she'd play the part. I wanted to see if she'd tell the truth or if she'd let me bleed for it first. Turns out she'd rather let me bleed. And I hadn't even seen the worst of it yet. She woke up before me the next day, a rare event. By the time I came downstairs, she had already showered, straightened her hair, and was halfway through a smoothie she never made before. Avocado, spinach, almond milk. She always hated almond milk, said it tasted like chalk. But there she was, sipping it with a little hum in her throat like she was in a commercial for a life she didn't share with me. She glanced up from her phone. I might go out later. Haven't decided yet. It was Saturday. We used to spend Saturdays grocery shopping together, arguing over cereal brands, sitting through kids' soccer games, doing house stuff. That had evaporated over the past 2 months. But this time, instead of asking where she was going or pretending I didn't care, I dropped the first domino. I found a key. She blinked. Slow. What key? It doesn't belong to this house. I found it in the laundry room behind the dryer. Pause. Must be one of the kids. Maybe from school or something. They don't have lockers. She stared at me now, calculating. Not surprised, that's the part that got me. She wasn't startled, just rearranging the furniture in her head to fit the new narrative. Well, I don't know what you're talking about. She started walking out of the kitchen like the conversation was over. Like I was the crazy one for even asking. That's when I stood up and walked to the drawer. Pulled it out. Held up the key. This one. She stopped, turned slowly. Her eyes landed on it for half a second before snapping back to mine. Never seen it. There was no flicker, no guilt, just that same bored deflection she'd been using every time she didn't want to answer a real question. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I just placed it gently on the counter between us. Then I asked her something I hadn't planned to ask yet. Whose apartment is it for? Her jaw didn't drop. She didn't gasp or break down or confess. She smirked. Honest to God, she smirked. Like I had just asked a kid if they stole a cookie and they were proud of it. You've been following me? I needed to know what was happening to my life. She exhaled through her nose like she was tired of having to pretend. Then, and I will never forget this, she said, you could have just let it happen. Would have been easier for both of us. Let it happen. That sentence echoed through my skull like an explosion. She said it so casually, like I was the unreasonable one for caring. Like her stepping out of our marriage, of our family, of our life was some natural progression and my resistance to it was a childish tantrum. You're seeing someone, I said. You've been seeing him for a while. She sat down. Not like she was ready to talk. Like she was tired of standing. Fine. You want details? Yeah. I'm seeing someone. And he listens to me. He actually wants to hear what I think about things. He doesn't just nod and pretend. I could feel something in my chest ripping sideways. I didn't respond. I didn't trust myself to. My mouth went dry. She wasn't done. We talked about this. Months ago. About opening things up. I told you I needed space. I told you I felt stuck. You said no. That wasn't a discussion. That was a shutdown. You asked for an open marriage because you were already seeing someone, I said. You didn't want freedom. You wanted a permission slip. She leaned back, tilted her head like I was being difficult. Call it what you want. At least I was honest. I couldn't believe the gall of her. You were never honest. You lied about where you were. You used your friends as alibis. You gaslit me for months and now you're pretending it's my fault for not playing along. Her expression cracked for the first time. Just slightly. But instead of backing down, she lashed out. I had to lie. You would have made it into some moral crisis when it's just people evolving. You're stuck in some 1950s idea of marriage. You didn't want to hear what I needed, so I found it somewhere else. You can hate me if you want. But I don't regret it. And there it was. She didn't regret it. Not the lies. Not the betrayal. Not dragging me through months of emotional quicksand. She sat there, smug, sipping that ridiculous green smoothie like I was some roadkill she'd already stepped over. I walked out. Not from the house. Not yet. I walked out of the kitchen into the backyard and sat in the freezing wind with nothing but my thoughts and the sound of a lawnmower 2 doors down. I stared at the grass. Listened to the dead silence inside me where all the love used to be. She didn't regret it. But that would change. I didn't speak to her for 3 days. Not out of pettiness, out of preservation. Something inside me had cracked so violently during that conversation, I knew if I opened my mouth again too soon, the words wouldn't be safe. They'd come out sharp, maybe even cruel. And she didn't deserve cruelty. She deserved clarity. Cold, clear truth, served without apology. But I wasn't ready yet. I needed the storm to settle in my head first. She didn't try to reach out either. No texts. No attempts to check in. Just nothing. Like 3 days of silence between us wasn't odd or alarming. Like we were roommates with separate lives now. And maybe we were. On the 4th day, something happened. I came home from work early. I didn't plan to. My brain was fried, and I had barely touched my lunch. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed another car parked across the street. Unfamiliar. Sleek. The kind of car bought in the middle of a midlife crisis or with a heavy dose of ego. My stomach tightened. I stepped inside and heard music. Soft, jazzy, ambient nonsense she never listened to when I was around. Her laugh followed. Light and breathy. Unmistakable. I walked quietly down the hallway, past the living room. I didn't even have to see them to know. The way she said his name, and yes, now I had it, Aaron, was different than how she said mine. Less weight. No history. I stopped just before the kitchen entrance. They were sitting close at the table. 2 coffee mugs. Her hand resting lightly on his. And he looked like he knew exactly who I was. The ghost of the husband she hadn't buried yet. I didn't barge in. I didn't yell. I stepped back, returned to the front door, slammed it behind me, and walked in loudly like I had just arrived. She jumped. He flinched. Good. I walked straight into the kitchen, stared at both of them, said nothing, just watched. She pulled her hand back slowly like it made a difference. "Hi," she said, blinking too fast. "You're home early." "Yeah," I said. Lucky timing. Aaron stood, tall, fit, probably a decade older than me, trying hard to look 5 years younger. He extended his hand like we were business associates. "Hey man, I've heard a lot about you. I bet you have." I didn't shake his hand. I stared at it until he dropped it, then looked at her. "This is what we're doing now?" She didn't look ashamed. If anything, she looked mildly annoyed, like I had interrupted a lunch date she was enjoying. "You said you didn't want to talk, so I moved on." "Moved on? We live in the same house. You made it clear you were done with us. You shut down." She turned to Aaron like she was expecting him to back her up. He didn't. He looked at me, then at her, and something flickered behind his eyes. A sliver of hesitation. I smiled then, not because I was happy, because I saw it. The first crack. He didn't sign up for this. He signed up for someone mysterious, unavailable, maybe even tragic. He didn't want to be in the middle of a war. "So, what's the plan?" I asked her. "He gets the daytime slot and I get the evening shift? We divvy up your attention like a timeshare." She didn't answer. "I see. So this isn't an affair anymore. This is a rotation." Aaron stepped in. "Look, I didn't mean to cause problems. You didn't cause anything. You're just the symptom." She didn't like that. Her voice sharpened. "Don't blame him because you couldn't keep our marriage interesting." There it was again. The finger pointed at me. The complete refusal to own any piece of the destruction. "Interesting?" I repeated. "Is that what you were looking for? You wanted fireworks and mystery after 10 years and 2 kids? You wanted a second act without closing the curtain on the first." Aaron looked increasingly uncomfortable. He stepped back toward the front door like he was mentally writing his exit strategy. And then she said something that pushed the whole thing off the ledge. "I gave you the chance to be part of this new chapter. You said no. That was your decision. Don't act like the victim now." My chest went still. "You gave me a chance," I said slowly. "You mean when you asked for an open marriage after already cheating? When you handed me a loaded gun and asked me to shoot our vows with it?" I walked to the door, opened it. "Aaron," I said without looking at him. "Get out." He hesitated. She looked furious now. "He doesn't have to." I turned, finally looked him in the eye. "You can stay if you want, but you're going to hear everything. Every lie, every broken piece she left along the way. I'll serve it raw. And I'll start with what she said about you when she came back from your place the first night." His face blanched. He glanced at her. She was silent. Then quietly he left. Door shut. Silence. Her eyes were cold. But behind them, just barely, something cracked. "You're a monster when you want to be," she said. "No," I replied. "I'm a mirror. You just hate the reflection." The house was too quiet after he left. Not peaceful, haunted. The kind of silence that wraps around your chest and makes your own heartbeat sound like a siren. She didn't follow me as I walked into the living room. She stayed in the kitchen, arms crossed, probably building her next strategy behind that stone face she wore like armor. I sat down and stared at the fireplace, not on, no flames, just a blank space where warmth used to be. And I waited. I gave her the chance. She knew it. I didn't speak. I wanted to see if there was even a flicker of remorse buried under all the arrogance and deflection. I waited for 5 full minutes. Then I heard her footsteps. She walked in slow and stood behind the couch like it was a shield. "Do you feel better now?" she asked. I laughed. Actually laughed. But there was no humor in it. "No. I feel like a fool who just found out the magician's tricks were real knives." "I didn't plan it like this," she said, quieter now. "It just happened." I turned to look at her. "Nothing just happens. You scheduled him between our kids' piano lessons. You timed your affairs around grocery runs. You crafted this." She blinked, looked away. I wasn't happy. I stood up. "Too fast. You think I was dancing through tulips?" "We were tired. We were stretched thin. You don't torch a house because the paint is peeling. You fix it." She stepped around the couch now, defensive. "I tried to talk to you. For years. But you were always working. Always stressed. You used to look at me like I was your escape. Then you started looking at me like I was another bill to pay." That hit harder than I wanted to admit. I sat back down, rubbed my temples. She walked to the window and stared out at the empty street like her answers were written on the pavement. "I never hated you," she said. I looked at her. "I never hated you either," I replied. "That's why this hurts like hell." Another silence. But this one wasn't empty. It was tense. Charged. "So what now?" she asked. I stood. Walked past her. Stopped at the stairs. "You get a lawyer." "So do I." Her breath caught, but she didn't speak. "I want joint custody. I want to keep the house until the kids graduate. I want a clean exit. But if you fight dirty, I'll remind the court of your open marriage idea and the timeline that exposes it as a cover for your affair." "You wouldn't," she said, but her voice cracked. I turned, looked her dead in the eye. "You don't know what I do anymore." She looked like she was about to cry for the first time. But I didn't move. I didn't soften. I wasn't her husband anymore. I was the man she broke, standing at the edge of what used to be a life. I went to the bedroom, locked the door, and I wrote an email to a divorce attorney I'd found 2 months ago but never contacted, not because I didn't believe she'd crossed the line, but because I was still stupid enough to hope she wouldn't. The next day, the kids noticed the tension. I didn't lie to them, but I didn't dump the weight of our wreckage on their backs either. I told them Mom and Dad were figuring things out. And for now, we'd be taking some space. That night, she slept on the couch without being told. And for the first time in months, I slept through the night. Not peacefully, but without her. I didn't speak to her for the next 2 days. Not in passing, not over the kids, not even a glance longer than necessary. The energy in the house shifted, everything was colder, sharper. Even the walls felt like they were listening. She tried once. Came to the bedroom door just after midnight, knocked lightly. I didn't answer. She waited, then left. I heard her walking down the hallway like someone visiting a stranger's house, unsure where to put her feet. The following day, I got the call from the attorney. We set the first meeting for Friday. I told them I wanted everything clean, professional, calm. I wasn't going to drag my kids through a courtroom mud pit if I could help it. But I made it very clear that I would not be taken for a ride. The same afternoon, I found a photo on my desk. It wasn't framed, just printed on regular paper. Her handwriting on the back. Us. Before the noise. It was from a trip to Lake George 7 years ago. She was in my lap, both of us laughing. Sunburned. Windswept. I remember the exact moment. She had just spilled her drink on my shirt and we didn't care. We were broke and tired and sunburned but happy. That photo used to be in the hallway until she quietly took it down 6 months ago. I didn't move it. I didn't even touch it. Just stared. And then left the room. That night I came home late. Took the long route back from work. Stopped for dinner alone. Sat in the car for 20 minutes in the driveway before going inside. The kids were already asleep. The living room was dimly lit. And she was sitting there with her legs folded under her. Phone in hand. She looked up. Eyes red. I started walking past her. But she spoke. I told him it's over. I stopped. Good, I said, flat. I didn't look at her. I told him it was a mistake. That I was trying to escape something that wasn't even about him. That I thought if I added chaos to the quiet, it'd make me feel something again. I turned slowly. And did it. She looked at me like I just stabbed her. It made me feel nothing. That's the worst part. I wanted to say something cruel. I wanted to throw every lie she ever told me back in her face. But I didn't. I just stood there, waiting. I wasn't trying to destroy us, she said. No, I said. You were trying to reinvent yourself at my expense. She stood, walked over, stopped just a few feet away. I miss the way you used to look at me. You killed the man who looked at you like that. And she broke. Completely. Tears. Real ones. Hands shaking. Knees buckling a little. I caught her out of instinct. Muscle memory. The part of me that still remembered the version of her who wasn't what she became. She pressed her face into my shoulder. I didn't hug her back. I hate who I've been, she said into my chest. You should. She sobbed harder. She wasn't crying for us. She was crying for herself. For the version of her that blew it all up and couldn't rewind time. When she calmed down, I stepped back. I'm not doing this for you, I said. I'm doing this for the kids. For me. I want peace. I want out of this mess. And I want to remember who I was before you made me feel like I was the problem. She nodded. Silent. We'll co-parent. We'll be civil. But you don't get to use guilt as a key back into the house you burned down. She looked at me like she wanted to say something. Apologize again. Promise change. I walked away before she could speak. Upstairs, I sat on the edge of the bed. The one we used to share. I realized I wasn't heartbroken anymore. I was done. 2 weeks passed. Divorce papers were drawn up. We hadn't filed yet, but the outlines were clear. She wanted mediation. I agreed, but with terms. My terms. I kept control of the house for now. I wanted stability for the kids. They didn't need to bounce between broken spaces while their world was already shaking. She moved into the guest room. We spoke only about schedules, school drop-offs, groceries. Her voice was softer now. Not kind, cautious. Like someone speaking through a cage, hoping the tiger on the other side was still sleepy. But I wasn't angry anymore. I was awake, focused. One morning, I caught her watching me. I was packing lunches for Liam and Ava. She stood in the doorway, arms folded, not saying a word. There was a flicker of something in her eyes, grief maybe, or realization. But she didn't speak, and neither did I. She turned and walked away. Later that night, I heard her on the phone, whispering, door half closed. She didn't know I was in the hallway. I don't think he'll ever forgive me, she said. Pause. No, I don't think I even deserve it. I walked away before I heard more. Not because I was eavesdropping, but because I didn't want to hear anything that might soften the line I had drawn. She'd already been allowed too deep for too long. But then came the email. It was from a guy named Paul. I didn't know him. The subject line was, "You don't know me, but I think you should read this." I opened it. Inside was a single paragraph and 4 screenshots. Paul said he was Aaron's brother-in-law. He said Aaron had a reputation, not just for dating married women, but for documenting it. The screenshots were texts between Aaron and one of his buddies. In them, Aaron mocked her. Called her the bored wife. Said she cried the first night and he thought she'd back out, but the attention was too good. He bragged about how easy it was and how her husband probably still thinks she's out buying almond milk. I stared at those texts for a long, long time. Not because I was shocked, I wasn't. But because of how perfectly it confirmed what I already knew deep down. It was never about love. It was about ego, escape, drama. She was so desperate to feel interesting again. She handed herself over to someone who viewed her like a dare. I printed the screenshots, left them on the kitchen counter. Nothing else. No note. When she came home that evening and saw them, her breath left her in a single broken exhale. She didn't cry. Not at first. She sat down at the table and just stared at the paper like it might disappear if she looked hard enough. I walked in, stood across from her. She looked up. Was it worth it? I asked. Her face crumbled. Not a dramatic scene, no yelling or sobbing. Just defeat. Quiet, cold defeat. I didn't know, she whispered. But you picked him, I said. That's the part that never changes. You picked him. You picked lies. You picked a fantasy where you're the victim of a dull life, and I'm the villain who didn't pay enough attention. She opened her mouth, then closed it. I was trying to feel alive, she finally said. You don't feel alive, I told her. You feel empty. That's why you burned everything. Because it was easier to destroy than repair. She folded the paper like she couldn't bear to look at it anymore. Then, to my surprise, she handed it back to me. Not to erase it, to give it to me, to keep, as if to say, yes, I earned this. I took it. Not to wave in her face. To remember what it cost. She stood, eyes glassy but dry. I'm sorry, she said. I know, I replied. But you still did it. And I left her there, sitting in the kitchen that used to be ours, surrounded by ghosts and echoes of a life she dismantled piece by piece. The next few weeks were mechanical. Wake up, kids to school, work, pickups, dinner, repeat. She kept to herself, quieter than I'd ever seen her. I think she understood by then that the version of me who used to chase after her, try to fix things, try to decode her shifting moods, he was gone. There was no warmth in my silence, just distance. Just a man fulfilling his duties while slowly packing away the past. But then came the letter. Not an email, not a text. A real letter, handwritten, folded into an envelope, slipped under my bedroom door like something sacred. I almost didn't read it. Thought maybe it would be another performance. Another sad monologue soaked in guilt with just enough charm to twist the knife. But curiosity wins, doesn't it? It was 5 pages long. She wrote about the early days. How she used to watch me from the bleachers at our son's soccer games and feel lucky that she'd ended up with a man like me. She talked about our old Sunday morning rituals, the ones we used to call slow starts, where we'd drink coffee and plan fake vacations we never took. She said she kept waiting for the spark to come back on its own, and when it didn't, she started blaming me for that emptiness. She admitted she stopped seeing me as a partner and started seeing me as a mirror that reflected her own boredom. Then came the part that turned my stomach. She wrote that the first time she went to his place, she had hoped I would catch her. I wasn't brave enough to end it. I thought maybe if you caught me, it would all come crashing down fast, and I wouldn't have to carry the guilt of making the choice. That's when I put the letter down. She wanted to be caught, not because she regretted it, but because she didn't want the burden of owning her decision. She wanted me to take the blame by reacting. If I had yelled, hit something, thrown her out, she could have spun it as proof that the marriage was already toxic. Instead, I had stared at her with quiet disbelief, and that left her holding the truth all by herself. I read the rest. She apologized, deeply, said she didn't expect forgiveness, only understanding, that she now realized what she lost, and that she didn't miss being with someone new. She missed being known. I folded the letter and locked it in the drawer with the screenshots from Erin's texts. Later that week, I met with the mediator. She sat across from me, looking smaller than usual. Dressed plain. No lipstick, no earrings. Just a quiet woman surrounded by legal documents and her own shattered reputation. The mediator asked if we wanted to attempt counseling before proceeding. She looked at me. I didn't even turn my head. No, I said. This is my counseling. She nodded, eyes down. We worked through the terms. I kept the house. She'd get a temporary apartment nearby. We'd split time with the kids 50-50 with an agreement to reevaluate based on their emotional adjustment. When the mediator asked us to list our assets, she hesitated, then reached into her folder and handed over a check. I sold the jewelry, she said. The necklace, the bracelet, and some other things. I don't want them anymore. I want the money to help with the kids. I didn't thank her. It was guilt money. Remorse, maybe. But you can't pay down betrayal like a credit card balance. I took it anyway. For them. For Liam and Ava. When the meeting ended, she asked if we could walk outside together. I agreed, for civility's sake. It was raining. Not hard. Just that quiet mist that feels like a whisper against your skin. We stood beside our cars. She looked at me and said, "You were a better man than I deserved." I shook my head. "No. You just became a worse woman than I expected." That hit her. She didn't cry. She just nodded once. "I hope one day you let someone love you again," she said. "I hope one day you know how to love without destroying someone in the process." We got in our cars. Drove opposite directions. It didn't feel like an ending. It felt like an exorcism. I didn't tell anyone about the letter. Not my brother, not my closest friend, not even my therapist. Yeah, I started seeing one around the time the mediator came into the picture. Something about speaking to someone with no skin in the game felt cleaner. Like I could finally scrape the rot off my ribs and see what was left underneath. I brought the letter to therapy once. I didn't read it out loud. Just held it in my lap like a confession I hadn't said out loud yet. The therapist, Susan, looked at me and asked, "Do you want to forgive her?" It was such a direct question. Simple, but sharp. I said no. I want to forget her. But I was lying, not to her, to myself. Because you don't print screenshots and keep letters in drawers if you want to forget. You do that when you're still dissecting the wreckage, trying to find the piece that explains why you didn't see the fire coming. And then something strange happened. The kids adjusted. Faster than I thought they would. Ava, only 8, took to the new routine like she was navigating a new game. Liam was quieter for the first few weeks, but then one night during dinner, he laughed so hard at a dumb joke I made about a spaghetti noodle that it felt like life might actually be breathing again. I started sleeping better. Not great, but I wasn't waking up at 3:13 a.m. anymore with phantom arguments replaying in my head. I even started running again. Early mornings, no music, just the sound of my breath and my shoes slapping the concrete like punctuation marks in a chapter one didn't ask to write. One night, I came home from a run and found a package on my doorstep. No return address. Inside was a photo album. Our family over the years. Holidays. Beach trips. Birthdays. Pages I hadn't seen in a long time. She must have taken it with her when she moved into the guest room. Inside the cover, one sentence written in black ink, "Don't let the ending erase the whole story." I left the album on the kitchen counter and didn't open it again for days. But eventually I did. Not out of sentiment. Out of defiance. Because she was wrong. The ending does matter. It redefines the tone of everything before it. You can read 10 beautiful chapters, but if the last one reveals the narrator was lying the whole time, you don't walk away with admiration, you walk away with a knot in your gut and a bitter taste in your mouth. A week later, I saw her. Not at a drop-off. Not during a pickup. At a grocery store of all places. She was standing in front of a display of olive oil looking completely ordinary. A cart with almond milk, grapes, and 2 bottles of red wine. Our eyes met. She froze. I gave her a nod, not cold, not warm, just polite, and started walking past. But she stopped me. "Do you ever think about what we had?" she asked. Not in a romantic way. More like someone studying an old bruise and wondering how deep it went. "I think about what I thought it was," I said. She nodded. I missed the version of me that lived in that. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time I saw it, not anger, not regret, just hollowness. "You didn't lose me," I said. "You left me. What you miss is the man who stayed even when you started to drift." She didn't argue. She just stood there, surrounded by rows of canned tomatoes and discount pasta, looking like someone who finally realized what she traded for a few hours of validation. I walked away, didn't look back, and it hit me as I left that store, carrying a bag of apples and bread. I didn't need to forget her. I needed to remember me. Spring came faster than expected. The trees bloomed like they hadn't watched the winter gut me from the inside out. The air had that new kind of sharpness, not cold, just honest. The kind that makes you feel like something is restarting whether you're ready or not. The house didn't feel haunted anymore. Felt mine. I changed the curtains. Got rid of the wall clock she'd picked out from some overpriced catalog. Painted over the accent wall in the dining room she swore brought depth, now it was clean, sharp white. A blank slate. The kids helped. Ava picked out a new welcome mat. Liam rearranged his bookshelves and said it made his room feel bigger, but I think what he meant was safe. We were rebuilding. Not the past, something entirely new. The version of life that exists after the fire, when the smoke clears and you realize you're still breathing. But just when I thought we'd settled into a rhythm, she called. Not a text. Not an email. A call. She hadn't done that in weeks. I stared at the screen for a while. Thought maybe she'd changed her mind about something logistical, the schedule, a school event, something easy. But no. I answered. Her voice was calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that people wear when they've rehearsed every word. "I need to talk to you. In person." I asked if something happened with the kids. "No," she said. "It's about me. And us." Sort of. Against my better judgment, I agreed. Public place. Saturday morning. Coffee shop near the park. I got there first. She walked in 10 minutes late, wearing a coat I'd never seen before. She looked thinner. Not sick, just smaller. Like someone who had stopped eating moments of joy a long time ago. We sat across from each other. She ordered chamomile tea. Used to be coffee with oat milk and a dash of cinnamon. Small thing. But I noticed. I'm not here to win you back, she started. Good, I said. Because that's not happening. She nodded. Took that in. Then reached into her bag and pulled out a small notebook. Black cover, worn edges. I started writing in this. After you stopped talking to me. I said nothing. I wanted to understand why I broke something so many people would kill to have. I kept trying to figure out when it started. The unraveling. I kept blaming the routine, the boredom, the loneliness. But the truth is, it wasn't any of that. She looked at me, eyes sharp but wounded. I was jealous of your peace. The way you could exist without constantly needing applause. I felt invisible next to you because you never needed the world to see you. And I couldn't stand it. So I lit a fire just to watch someone, anyone, look at me. I stared at her, silent. I thought I was the one who outgrew the marriage, she said. Turns out you just outgrew me first. You just didn't announce it like I did. I leaned back, not out of arrogance, out of clarity. I didn't outgrow you, I told her. I evolved when I had to. You imploded because you chose to. She wiped her eyes. No tears, just reflex. I'm selling the apartment, she said, moving farther out, closer to my sister. I need distance. From everything. I nodded. Thank you for still being a good father, she added. I'll always be that, I said. No matter what you did. She stood, hesitated. Then said the one thing I didn't expect. I'll regret this for the rest of my life. Then she left. I didn't chase her. Didn't stand up. Didn't replay her words like a movie in my head. I just sat there. Still. Grounded. Alive. And I realized something strange. I had no need to forgive her. Because forgiveness implies she still had weight in my heart. But I wasn't carrying her anymore. Summer arrived with its usual flair, kids out of school, sprinklers on suburban lawns, the distant sound of barbecues on every other block. Life, as it does, kept moving. Not waiting for anyone to catch up. Not pausing to ask if you're ready. Just dragging the calendar forward like a current pulling at your ankles. And for once, I didn't resist it. The divorce finalized in July. Quietly. No courtroom scene. No shouting match. Just signatures, handshakes, a few exhausted glances exchanged across a desk. She wore a gray blouse, the same one she used to wear on mornings she needed confidence. It looked different now. She looked different. Older. Not in age, in consequence. We didn't speak afterward. Didn't go for one last drink or walk or closure conversation. That fantasy was dead. It had been dead for a long time. Some endings don't require a speech. They just arrive. Like dusk. Later that evening, I sat in the backyard with Liam and Ava eating watermelon and swatting at mosquitoes. Ava asked if we could go on a road trip soon. Liam wanted to see the ocean. We started planning. Just like that, no drama. Just kids in summer and something new beginning where something old had collapsed. After they went to bed, I poured a glass of bourbon and sat alone. I thought about her. About the version of her that existed before the affair. Before the lies. The girl with wind in her hair on the lake. The mother who used to trace our children's faces in the dark and whisper, "You're the best thing I ever did." I mourned that woman. Because this one, the one who broke it all and handed me the ashes, she wasn't mine anymore. And I wasn't hers. Not even a little. I burned the letter that night. I didn't do it out of anger. I did it because I needed to let her live in the past where she belonged. The pages curled, blackened, disappeared into flame. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like release. A few days later, I got a message from Paul, the man who sent me those screenshots. He said Erin had already moved on. New married woman. Same pattern. But this one had already caught wind of the warning signs. He laughed about it, called it poetic justice. I didn't reply. I didn't care. She made her choice. Let her live with it. And I started dating again. Slowly. Carefully. Not because I needed to fill a void, but because I finally hit space that wasn't haunted. No expectations. Just coffee, laughter, shared playlists. It was strange feeling seen without suspicion, admired without manipulation. I took my time, and for once it felt easy. One night, Ava asked me if I still loved Mommy. I knelt down, looked her in the eye. I love who she was, I said. But sometimes people change. And that's not your fault. Or mine. She nodded, like she understood more than she should have to. And then she asked, will you ever love someone again? I smiled. I already do. I love you and Liam. That's more than enough for now. She hugged me tight. That kind of hug kids give when they know the world doesn't make sense but they still trust you to make it okay. And in that moment I realized what this whole storm had taught me. Not just about betrayal, but about survival. About rebuilding without resentment. About walking away without hate. About how sometimes the person you thought you'd grow old with turns into the person you grew through. So here's my advice to anyone reading this. When they beg for an open marriage, check if they've already closed the door behind you. When they cry about regrets, remember they didn't cry for you, they cried because their fantasy didn't last. And when they finally see what they lost, smile. Walk away. Because your peace is the one thing they'll never own again.